I analyzed businesses and the creators in the creator economy for over 8 years. And of course, I made some mistakes. Today, I want to talk about 4 different scenarios that I got completely wrong. I got overly excited. I spoke so much about how this next thing will be the biggest thing, and I got it wrong. So I want to look back, talk a little bit about what I got wrong, and talk about why specifically I got it wrong. Because we all learn, we all evolve, and I think it's important for us to recognize, especially in such a fast-moving environment like creator economy. First one, remember this one? I don't know if you do. I very well do. So this business specifically with all this bouncing things around, and at some point it will stop and we can actually look and see the logo. It is Clubhouse. So, for those of you who do not remember or vaguely remember something like this happening, Clubhouse was essentially a new social media app that just exploded during the pandemic. The whole idea was simple: no video, no pictures, audio only. You can get into the groups and you can essentially talk. There's some people on stage and they talk, the other people in the room, they're listening. There are different topics and different, genres and things that people can discuss across different rooms. Very interesting idea. If this reminds you of some other app and a couple of features, you will not be incorrect. This is where I got wrong. So, when it comes to digital entrepreneurship, when it comes to different ideas, especially in the software space, and I've spent nearly now, 15 plus years in specifically SaaS, it is sometimes hard to tell early on a dedicated company with an interesting business versus an interesting future that can be part of a bigger company. I'll illustrate this. Stories. Snapchat back in the day came up with it, right? And they essentially were the first ones to come up with this whole idea of like vanishing messages that within the 24 hours will vanish and you can post it to everyone else. And now everyone and their grandmother have them. If you don't recall, even Slack at some point tried to install the stories. Likely they dropped that idea. But Instagram successfully adopted stories, and now that's their feature. And it's something people actually use very actively on Instagram. When it came to Clubhouse initially was a great idea when it came to audio only experience. It was interesting, it was nice, it was very casual, it was very non intrusive in the sense that like you didn't have to be like this on camera, you didn't have to like, doll up, not like I doll up, as many of my wrinkled shirts in the prior videos will tell you. But from the perspective of actual content, it was very easy to deploy because it was audio only. You didn't have to be on camera, so you could do a lot of things with it, and you could do it at any place, assuming there's not too much background noise. What I think I missed and I got too excited about, I forgot about thinking a little bit more about longevity and where this can go. The Clubhouse is still around. It's still, I checked it, it has like over, I think, 10 million active users. So the app is doing okay. It's $1 billion company still. But when it came to specifically adopting that feature, it natively fit very well in Twitter. And on Twitter today, there are Twitter Spaces, which is essentially what Clubhouse was. Twitter Spaces were developed, I think, within a couple of months of like Clubhouse actually exploding. And it became a big thing. It wasn't always successful, but eventually they got the technology down. And now I see quite a few creators. I see a lot of businesses like having the regular spaces at the scheduled time, early in the day, later in the day, whatever makes sense for their audience. And they host those and they're very successful and they're very popular. Many people join them. Many people have very interesting discussions. A lot of people kind of like, you know, conspire, I guess, to go and put someone on blast in some of those spaces. So it creates a lot of drama, a lot of, interesting audio tracks that people then use across more legacy media, more visual media. So it definitely found a place in our culture, and it all really exploded and started thanks to Clubhouse. What I got wrong there is the fact that Clubhouse was really more of a feature than an actual long-term business. Again, they're still around, they're kind of like chugging along, but I don't think my level of excitement met their level of, future potential. So they kind of like stalled maybe like halfway through there, and I was really thinking about like, hey, how can this become this next big thing that the creators can use, especially because of the fact you didn't have to be on camera there, right? But again, podcast, they're there for the long form stuff. YouTube still continues to kind of like take over the audio space, only in the sense that people actually watch podcasts on YouTube, but they just put it in the pocket and listen in their headphones. And similarly, as I said, when it came to audio only feature like Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces really take it over. And for those who are interested in maybe showing some parts on video, hey, Instagram Live is also a thing, and we have obviously still Twitch, and we have Kick, kind of like who came up maybe a year or two later after Clubhouse popped. So we now have a lot more different places where people can go for those like long form primarily audio discussions. And if they want a video, they can go on some of those other video platforms. So overall, again, got overly excited, was an interesting idea. Got it wrong because of the fact that I didn't really spend enough time thinking through what is the long-term potential of this application. Now, this next thing that I got wrong will not sound controversial at all, because after all, it is just NFTs. Where do I even start with this one? So, for those of you who maybe, I don't know, lived under the rock for the past few years, NFT is non-fungible token. Essentially, the idea is it gives you kind of like a unique ownership of a digital asset, right? In a very simplistic form. So you have a photo, supposedly you're kind of like the only owner of that photo, and there's digital signature kind of like proving your ownership. Where did I get this one wrong? Simply, I've actually came across blockchain back in the day when I used to work at Gartner, right? Gartner at some point in time, and it was like what, early 2010s, when they really started to publish a lot of documentation and a lot of kind of like analysis of the blockchain specifically for the supply chain. And I was interested in because I started my career kind of like in the supply chain industry. So it was kind of interesting to see, hey, what did they come up with? And there was this whole concept of being able to keep track of the goods from the very point of their original kind of like production, and all the materials from all of the original production points all the way to the point of sale. So it's kind of good for the ethical reasons, for the business reasons, right? There was a lot of interesting opportunities that stem out of being able to track where something came from. And those open ledgers, essentially, that record, they're permanent, no one can delete them because they're shared across all of those data points, became very interesting opportunity for folks who decided, hey, we can apply it to the digital art and different other digital assets and put them out there. What I got excited about is the fact that this kind of shared centralized ownership, shared and centralized, I guess a little bit of tautology, but the idea was is that you can split something in different parts and share it, and those folks will own it, right? Kind of like long term. That became an interesting idea from the perspective of the creator, because now all of a sudden, instead of just selling lots and just selling some sort of like digital art, you can sell something that creates a connection with your audience. And the idea that I'm still, by the way, transparently, still excited about, I still think that's a major benefit, are all of those additional utilities. Because otherwise, if you want to sell something like a membership and give some perks down the line to your audience, you have to go to Patreon, you have to go to YouTube membership, you have to create your own membership site, you open OnlyFans if you're that kind of a creator. But the idea is that there is still a company between you and your user, and in most cases you don't get to keep their personal information to contact them directly if something goes wrong with the platform, right? Like with YouTube, we don't have contact with our subscribers directly. NFT kind of changes that because it creates this direct relationship with your audience where you can exchange the contact information. You can give them one of the utilities around the NFT based on that kind of like direct outreach, maybe some perks, maybe early access to future products. There were so many different things, and still are, in my opinion, when it comes to being able to go and sell something to your audience and have that direct content. Now, where did it get wrong? Where did it get wrong? It went absolutely off the rails thanks to all the scammers and folks who realized that, hey, with this hype, with folks kind of like, especially in the United States, getting those like stimulus checks through the pandemic, they have some extra cash to burn every couple of months. They get those like, a few $1,000s. So what they start doing, they start promoting this and kind of like exaggerating the value. Celebrities jumped on it. All of a sudden you have those, monkeys, I guess apes, being sold for like 50,000 plus per NFT. You have all the other folks selling different tokens, those tokens going up and down, Doge token going up and down, some people making millions of dollars, some people losing millions of dollars. You have even recently, as recent as this year, the president of the United States joining in on a fund and basically, selling a bunch of tokens to his fans. All of this turned into such a business machine, and most of those opportunities were essentially turned into an opportunity to what is called rug pull. And rug pull, the idea is very simple. You promote a certain token, you launch it, a bunch of people, because of the hype, go jump in to buy it. Someone has to sell it for someone to buy it. The actual people who started the token, usually the ones who sell it, and they quickly sell it at the peak, and then the price just craters because all the people who created that token are no longer owning it. There's no future for this token, and essentially the price craters, and then the folks who bought it left kind of like holding the bag, which is essentially left with essentially product or an asset that has zero value, but millions of dollars were stolen, right? Allegedly. I have to put the allegedly all around all of this because not many folks have been prosecuted. There've been some, which is good, and especially thanks to CoffeeZilla, who's like doing an amazing job when it comes to hunting people down for NFTs. Someone we're gonna come back to in a second again. But there's so much of that fraud, and so much was happening when it came to just like people trying to make every single buck, trying to move to some of those countries where extradition doesn't exist, where local laws are not prepared, where there's no income taxes, and just like pump 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 pump, sell, rob people of their money, and kind of like hopefully stay somewhere in one of those Caribbean islands without any laws. And so that completely killed kind of like the reputation for NFTs. And today NFTs really, that's why I'm kind of like was joking about the controversy. NFT right now is very much a negative term, right? I don't think if you'll say NFT to anyone, folks will be like, oh yeah, this is this great thing, which is unfortunate. And as I said, I'm still a believer that that kind of like centralized point of record and the digital proof of ownership of certain assets still offers an opportunity for the creators to provide some sort of utility, to be in direct contact with their audience. But the problem is right now, it needs more regulation. As much as the whole idea of the blockchain was to avoid the regulation and kind of like self-regulate, I do think because of the amount of people who tried to scam and really just scammed folks, we need more regulation around this before we can come back and safely say like, hey, this is a good place, we should continue to test it. Again, I own some NFTs from some of the creators. I'm still holding on to them because I'm like, hey, I mean, one, I probably won't be able to sell them at the same price. Let's be real. But the other part of it, I still believe that there is some value to them. So we'll see. This is like one of those things I got wrong, and primarily I got it wrong because I missed the fact that there was so much opportunity to fraud people. And because of all this fraudulent activity, it completely killed the momentum for this technology. So unfortunately, we're going to have to sit back and wait and see for other use cases that are legit, that are a lot more secure, and hopefully that will bring back the hype. So I'm saying I got it wrong, but I got it wrong for now. For this next one, I got it wrong, and I really, really got it wrong. So like, let's be real about it. Specifically, it's 99 Originals, which is funny enough another NFT project, but really I'm not about the NFT project specifically. I'm about this individual, Logan Paul. Controversial figure. You can say, hey, TohirT, there's been enough of things happening in Japan and some other places which should have told you should question the character. And I did. And I judged the character, I think, appropriately. But I'm also a big believer that people just make mistakes, especially young folks, right? Like Logan Paul. You make stupid mistakes and you kind of like hopefully recognize that you made a mistake and you recover from it. 99 Originals, if we'll come back to it for a second, was actually a really cool project. I still, ignoring the person who created it for a second, I still think it was a super cool project. Like the whole idea behind it, if you are not aware, was essentially to create 99 original Polaroids that each kind of like tell their own unique story, then sell each individual one as an NFT. It gives you kind of like part of the community. You can also get potentially a chance to get the actual physical NFT, and it's interesting, kind of like, I don't know, token small art piece. Like it was cool, like genuinely, like even look back at them, and there was like an entire series of videos, by the way, that was created for each one of them. So it's kind of cool to go and see all 99 of them and kind of like how they were created. They were fun, interesting ideas. Like I genuinely still like, I look back and I'm like, damn it, they were like, there was such a cool original idea, like genuinely cool original idea. The person though, who executed that idea almost back to back with this, decided to launch this small project called CryptoZoo. I will not even go down that rabbit hole of explaining everything that happened here. Go search if you're curious. I'll kind of like link it down below. CoffeeZilla, an amazing creator, a digital investigator, made an entire series about the CryptoZoo and kind of like everything that happened there. And allegedly, and I have to say allegedly many times in this, I think, section, because it's a current series of lawsuits between different parties. CryptoZoo turned out to be allegedly a scam. And essentially, Logan Paul was the full owner. He tries to kind of like back out of it and say there were a bunch of different people. They really screwed me over. They didn't tell me what was happening. A lot of noise around that. But if you really look deeper into it, and especially if you watch all the proof and all the evidence that CoffeeZilla discovered, you can clearly tell what the story is, right? Like allegedly, but it can clearly tell you that from the very beginning, the intent was to basically take as much money in, not provide much functionality, basically coming back to my point about NFTs, defraud people who owned those NFTs and those digital assets, allegedly. And so this is where it was very interesting timing, because literally all of this blew up, I kid you not, within maybe like a week or two of me making a video about 99 Originals. And so this one I definitely got wrong, primarily because I think of two things. Again, NFTs we already spoke about. I did not predict properly how much of a fraud will be injected into that technology. But the other part, I really didn't, I think, judge well enough, and I was, I think, a little bit too soft originally on the character of individual who started the company, right? Again, I think the track record is there. One point is not a trend line, but once you have enough of those points, you can start drawing the trend lines. You can kind of like understand the kind of individual you're dealing with. And this is something we have to be careful about, especially when it comes to creator economy, especially when it comes to working with some of the creators, because it's easy to look at the potential interesting idea and forget about the person who touches that idea. But in the creator economy, it's nearly impossible. Ultimately, unless you completely kind of like, group channel, everything that we do in the creator economy ties back to the individual who started it all, right? There was a channel at the very beginning. The channel maybe grew up and evolved into multiple channels, maybe into physical goods, digital goods, multiple different businesses. All of those will still have a DNA of that creator. And if the DNA is rotten, that rot will expand and precipitate through all of those businesses, right? And we don't have to go far. You can probably tie and say, hey, there's like 4.A, or I guess 3.8 right now, because it's the third thing I got wrong. You can look at Prime and you can see where Prime is at. You can look at some of the other businesses that this individual touched and you can see where those businesses at. And they're all kind of like in the same state where a lot of money was made, a lot of hype was produced to make sure the money can be made, and then all of this is kind of like slowly but surely crumbling, right? And as I said, 99 Originals, as much as I hate saying this, it's like, this was a good project. I really enjoyed it, but it was really kind of like messed up about everything else that was happening around. So I cannot just say, hey, ignore all of it, focus on the art. As much as I understand that sometimes we need to kind of like separate the art from the artist, when it comes to at least subjects that I'm covering, and I'm covering primarily the business of being a creator, we cannot afford to do that, because individuals, their ethics, and how they go about the business, especially in this industry that is heavily driven by personalities, cannot be separated. You cannot separate someone else's history and how they behaved and the trend lines that they've created against the business that you're looking at right now. I'm a strong believer in that. I'm a big believer in saying no to amazing opportunities if they're tied to questionable individuals. I've held that belief ever since I was in private equity, in the venture capital, and I now reinforce that belief entering the creator economy, because there's some interesting creators with interesting ideas, but just the creator themselves is not the person I would have ever aligned myself with. So it's something I would have easily kind of like stepped back out if I was ever offered an opportunity to participate. And I've been offered a couple of opportunities to participate with some interesting individuals that was a very easy pass for me because of some of those reasons. So artistically, it was fun. Everything else about this one, I got it wrong. And this final one, speaking of things that hurt a little bit. If you don't recall this, I've made a couple of videos about this business. Where do we even go? Probably About. It's a good place to go. Again, full service company, maybe not. Let's go for the services. Sunday is essentially a company that does a lot of interesting things around branding, design, right? Like product manufacturing, marketing, and media. Have some interesting portfolio of projects that they've done, right? With several different companies. In all fairness, two of them, Bloody Sunday and Some Kids, are actually owned by the same company, so you're gonna have to remove them and keep all the other ones at place. This is that company that was founded by Jesse from Nelk when he left the YouTube group, right, like controversial YouTube group, and he essentially decided to go and start his own brand. I got hyped for the fact that I knew that Jesse's very talented merchandiser, right, from the perspective of like he came up with a lot of Nelk product lines when it came to different products and the merch, and they made like tens of millions of dollars off of their apparel and some of the accessories, and eventually they co-created the Happy Dad and went in that direction, right? So it was a lot of interesting opportunities that they've created for themselves and they've realized and turned into millions of dollars. One of them was actually also another NFT project that completely was forgotten, but they made like $27 million on it. I did not forget, but there you go, another example of maybe some of the trends and trend lines. But to be very clear, Jesse did not do anything illegal. The reason why he's on the list is not because, oh my God, like I completely changed my opinion. I still like the guy. I still like what the Sunday stands for. I still have a lot of like memorabilia here from the company, and I still kind of like enjoy supporting it. What I got wrong was the fact that I really thought Sunday as a company will have an opportunity to go after the creator space and really start partnering with different creators from all over the world, help them produce interesting shows, help them produce interesting products, help them essentially create the business infrastructure behind their brand. Where I miscalculated was the fact that Jesse did not really want to do that. That was the unfortunate part. And I think it's okay for me to talk about it right now. I've done just a bit of work kind of like providing the feedback, and I did this whole presentation, and I've shared it with the team. The Sunday team kind of like watched, and hopefully took some of the feedback well. I haven't heard from every single team member. Some of them I've heard, and that was very positive, right? But basically the whole concept, the whole idea was that I really thought this was their opportunity to kind of like create a brand where you go and you essentially help creators make the most of their brand opportunity by providing them the infrastructure and scaffolding around their reputation, right? Like someone has an interesting idea, they've developed it, and they're like, how do I turn it into the maybe physical product, digital product? How I turn it into the show? Sunday Studios would have been right there helping them kind of like realize their potential. It was a long process. Like one of those early original videos that they've posted on a Sunday YouTube channel were amazing from that perspective, because they would talk kind of like and show step by step what it likes, like conceptualizing, promoting, trying to sell some of the folks on the idea, setting up supply chain infrastructure, finding the designs, going through all this process. Fascinating. Loved watching that stuff. But again, the thing that I got wrong is that Jesse really felt like he wanted to come back to the content. And you can slowly see kind of like that drift. I actually, let's see, just for a second. Because there was the whole part that I've spoken actually when I was talking to their team about it. Is that there was like separate, again, I will not pull it up because I did not necessarily commit to like sharing it ever outside of the team, but I did this whole analysis where I looked at all the videos that they had on the channel, and I literally kind of like highlighted the ones that were actually on the business side and the ones that were just like for the funsies, and kind of just reminded almost like of an elk type videos. And it was interesting to see that as you kind of like move deeper into this environment, like you see a lot of them right now is showing kind of like what's happening behind closed doors, different promotions that they're making. But the further you go in, the more it becomes ridiculous, the more it becomes kind of like this, more of, as I said, Nelk-like content, just some pranks, just people acting silly, right? Doing all sorts of things and just trying to speak my language in a good way. Meaning they're stronger language the way to refer to the acts that they were performing. Let's put it this way. Tomfoolery, whatever. And this was kind of like the passion for Jesse, which is, again, there's nothing wrong about it. I really think he's still a very talented individual. I think the team and everyone else who's kind of like still works there, they have an opportunity now with like Short and Simple. It's kind of like a podcast / talk show that they produce on YouTube. Again, a lot of tomfoolery, let's put it this way. A lot of crazy acts, stuff that not up my alley, not something of the interest. And that's where kind of like I diverted away from the brand, because what I was interested in, what I thought was the really massive potential for the company, was those original things that they've done and different infrastructure that they could have built for the creators and partner with the creators, create content around how they worked on this, like brand promotions and things of that nature. There was so much freaking potential that was lost there, in my opinion. I don't know if it's kind of like recoverable at this point. It doesn't sound like the entire Sunday team is still the same. At least I know for a fact a couple of people left who I spoke with, and then there are a couple of other people who I think still kicking around but doing something else within the company. So this one was sucked a little bit putting it on the list because of the fact that I was so excited about they were doing, and I thought that, hey, this is going to be one of those companies. And I've covered companies like Fan of a Fan before. I've covered other companies that help support creators, but this was the one where there was clearly a lot of potential to do more beyond just like apparel, beyond just merchandising, because of the branding opportunities, because of the media tie-ins, different things that they could have created kind of like alongside to help the creator really kind of like put a lot of thought into their brand. And now we're back to the place where some creators do that, but mostly agencies kind of like fill that gap right here and there, which I think is a missed opportunity, because I think creators who really get into the space and start working on this kind of opportunities with other creators can take it to the next level, because they understand the market, they understand what it's like to be creator, and they're not gonna, kill them with some ridiculous fees when it comes to producing all of this potential. So yeah, I think between the four, I would say probably that was kind of like descending ranking of how badly I got it wrong, right? Like Clubhouse, I was really excited. It was like back in the day, one of the longest videos I've ever made. I was so pumped and I wanted to cover it, right? And talk about all the features, functionality, all that stuff. Then I think NFTs probably like right there in line, maybe a little bit over, depending on the size of an impact because of all these frauds that I got wrong. But again, I strongly believe that there's more potential for it to come back, say, than Clubhouse. Clubhouse, I think, is still a feature. I'm not sure the future for that company, where it lies. For the NFTs, I feel like there's still going to be applications. We're just going to see people circling around this technology until they get it right. Logan Paul, I got it wrong, but not from the perspective I just became a fanboy, but more from the perspective of like, I should have judged the character a little bit better and thought about that tie-in of the character within the creator economy to the businesses and the projects that they create. And Sunday, again, kind of got it wrong, but really just more my personal got it wrong, right? Like it was, I imprinted too much of my vision into what it could have been, not necessarily taking into account what the owner's vision was for it. And this is kind of like one of those important takeaways that we all should have, right? When it comes to personal relationship and especially business opportunities, like when you start partnering with folks, and again, not like I partnered, but if that would have been a partnership, that would have been a very frustrating partnership, because I would not have asked the right questions. I would have got so excited about the potential without pushing to the point of saying, hey, let's really get on the same page when it comes to what are you trying to build and what I see this brand kind of like becoming over time. So again, did I get a lot of things right as well? Plenty. I'm excited about those. And I think I'll still get many more things incorrect, because that's kind of like the nature of being excited about the new industry, being excited about doing interesting new things. You will always get something wrong. There will always be some interesting idea that you get hyped for and then eventually dies down. There were so many channels. I think it was like, at least I was scrolling through the videos just kind of like to remind myself, maybe, hey, do I have another thing that I got wrong to make it 5 instead of 4? None of them were like sufficient enough for me to make an interesting story. But also, man, the amount of channels I spoke about that no longer produce the same type of content or produce content at all, that I was like hyped. It's almost small anecdote. I got one of the most inspirational creators for me, like many in my generation, was Casey Neistat. But very transparently, I wasn't early on his bandwagon. There's a whole separate story I'll say for one day when I make that kind of like video. But I've ignored Casey on purpose for a little while, because I thought he's actually kind of like in Logan Paul's world, because he would always hang out with him, and I was like, this is just one of those another hype YouTubers. Like I don't care about this. But eventually, through some other again stories and things that happen in my life, I'll save it for the full story. I watched a couple of pieces of content. I was like, hey, this guy's actually all right. Okay, let me watch some more of Casey Neistat. And I swear to God, within like maybe 2 or 3 months of me really starting to watch his daily vlogs, he stopped daily vlogging. Like that was the timing. And I can persistently have this timing with some of the other creators I get excited about. I get excited about one of the other creators I made a video about. Literally, they stopped posting like within a couple of weeks. They still post now. They came back, but it's a lot different format and kind of like completely switched tracks. And there have been a few others. There have been plenty of creators who are still creating, doing amazing things. But it's always interesting to see how, like, again, we can get hyped about something, especially from the business perspective. We can get really interested in the business idea, but you have to take into account and kind of like really understand and consider where's that other creator, the partner in their journey, where this is going, what's the potential, kind of like how we go about it. I made plenty of videos about talking about potential on the business side, monetization, but there's what I'm talking about specifically is more of the personal thing, because again, everything in this industry still right now revolves around the personalities around which those brands are created. So it's something important for us to consider. And I think it's kind of like a common theme within all of those, with except of maybe, Clubhouse, which to some extent was just more of a feature versus an actual company thing. But the other 3 stories are purely the stories of individuals who are at the center of the technology or the business idea, and they just, took the wrong turn or a perceived wrong turn that we disagree with. So I hope this was useful. Again, it was a little bit of retrospective just to show that there are interesting things that evolve, and it was kind of fun to look back at some of those videos and think about, like, hey, I wonder where these people are. So it was a little bit self-serving, but it was kind of fun. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next Saturday. Peace.